Post-structuralist French philosopher Jacques Derrida claimed that we can never have an experience unmediated by language. Labels such as postmodernist, modernist, illusionist, realist, surrealist, etc., at best provide a context in which to view the work. At worst, they limit, inhibit, and marginalize the viewer's ability to interpret an artwork. Labels simplify our expectations, requiring less of the viewer with therefore less to gain. However, they also allow in a broad sweep to recognize shared traits or philosophies in a group of artists, such is the case with the postmodernist. According to Douglas Crimp, the postmodernist believes, quote, "We only experience reality through the pictures we make of it. To an even greater extent, our experience is governed by pictures. Pictures in newspapers and magazines, on television, and in the cinema. Next to these pictures, first-hand experience begins to retreat, to seem more and more trivial." The postmodernist artist often borrows, adopts, transposes imagery and icons from the media of culture. Images are often culled from film, TV, newspaper, and advertising. The term appropriation is part of our art vocabulary because of the postmodernist. Their appropriations, borrowing from other artists or from media, are essentially quoting from culture. Linda Andre wrote, "Postmodernism seeks to dismantle the modernist agenda, autonomy, authenticity, originality, self-referentiality. Postmodernism believes in the power of mass production, with the loss of the art object's aura, as Walter Benjamin so aptly postulated. In fact, the modernist hallmark, self-expression, is strongly denied by these artists." Douglas Crimp wrote, "A number of artists, most of them living in New York and written about by New York critics, are appropriating images from film, TV, newspapers, advertising, the media of culture, by recontextualizing these already made images or by adopting the conventions these media utilize by directing scenarios of their own." Michael Starenko wrote, "All these artists who've grown up in the 50s and 60s and lived in a world filled with images have learned how to manipulate the syntax, the strategies of mass culture, advertising, film, television, in a self-conscious, enlightened manner." Sam Seymour wrote, "Another item on the postmodernist agenda is to install content back into art in a new way, by attempting to deconstruct culture and society's codes." Diane Neumeier wrote, "But is the difference between modernism and postmodernism be an absolute difference? This is an especially troubling question, because it seems to suggest that being a modernist or a postmodernist is an absolute, self-conscious either-or decision." Craig Owen wrote, "It is a commonplace assertion nowadays that we have entered the historical period of postmodernism in all of the arts, even if there are still debates in some quarters over what that term actually means. There is, perhaps, no area in which the project of postmodernism has been formulated so coherently, promoted so ceaselessly, and has triumphed so conclusively as in the realm of contemporary art photography." Cindy Sherman studied at State University, New York, Buffalo in the mid-1970s. One of her fellow students was artist Robert Longo. She moved to New York City after graduating. She began her Untitled Film Stills series in 1977, where she placed herself in the roles of B-movie actresses. She dresses up in wigs, hats, dresses, playing the roles of characters. While they may have been mistaken once for self-portraits, these photographs only play with elements of self-portraiture and are really something different. In each of these photographs, Sherman plays a type, not an actual person, but a self-fabricated fictional role. There is the archetypical housewife, the woman in distress, the woman in tears, the dancer, the actress. The actress, Cindy Sherman, plays all of these characters. Her characters are stereotypes. They're women's roles inspired by 1950s and 1960s Hollywood films, film noir, and European art house films. Sherman carefully communicates to the viewer that these works are not meant to depict Cindy Sherman, the person. She titles each Untitled and numbers them, depersonalizing them in the process. Museum of Modern Art, New York wrote, Cindy Sherman is widely recognized as one of the most important and influential artists in contemporary art. Throughout her career, she has presented a sustained, eloquent, and provocative exploration of the construction of contemporary identity and the nature of representation, drawn from the unlimited supply of images from movies, TV, magazines, the internet, and art history. Working as her own model for more than 30 years, Sherman has captured herself in a range of guises and personas, which are at turns amusing and disturbing, distasteful and affecting. To create her photographs, she assumes multiple roles of photographer, model, makeup artist, hairdresser, stylist, and wardrobe mistress. With an arsenal of wigs, costume, makeup, prosthetics, and props, Sherman has daftly altered her physique and surroundings to create a myriad of intriguing tableaus and characters, from screen siren to clown to aging socialite. Sherman's work addresses stereotypes. The vulnerability in this image, for example. One critic wrote, Sherman reinforces such oppressive constructions of women by re-exposing her audience to something already too familiar, women seen as vulnerable, passive sexual objects. These images can be termed postmodern in that they consider representation itself and are self-referential by design. She takes on a variety of social and psychological issues, violence against women amongst them. Sherman uses herself as a vehicle for the commentary on a variety of issues about the modern world. Most of these are centered around the role of the woman or the role of the artist. One critic wrote, in all of her pictures, women are playing their traditional roles. They are doing something, but that something is to wait for someone else outside the frame to act. The women are passive, but don't think Sherman is saying this is how women should be. They are inherited roles that can be dismantled once they are clearly seen. In 1989 and 1990, she began a series of ornate history portraits in which she posed as aristocrat, clergymen, or milkmaids in the manner of old-style master paintings. This is an installation view of one of her exhibitions to give you a sense of the scale and the presence of her work on the gallery wall. I've been looking at Cindy Sherman work for some 35 years, and interestingly, while she is partly the subject matter in every one of her photographs, I'm not sure that if I saw her in a hallway that I would recognize her. She's more great actress than chameleon, but a bit of both. This video will give you a sense of Sherman the person.
Did you know they have press-on nails for pedicures?
Wait a minute.
I haven't tried them yet, but I'm really dying to try them. Isn't that crazy? I'm thinking of just wearing them myself, for a party, just as a joke, you know. I mean, except these aren't as obvious. These are maybe more obvious because they have little polka dots on them, and they just look like, who would, wear little polka dots on their toes? my work is not about kind of fantasizing about characters or situations. Some people, I think, have thought that the characters I do were, yeah, like as if I've always fantasized about being a femme fatale or whatever, if in my film stills. I don't think of it as that literal to me. When I'm doing the characters, I really don't feel like it's some sort of something that grows out of my fantasy, my own dreams. In college, when I would do it, I would, become a character and then sort of think, well, gee, here I am as Lucille Ball. What do I do now? So then it became sort of a thing and a little more like performance. And I started to do it to going to parties sometimes. I remember once getting all in character and wanting to go to some opening and feeling like something was missing. And then I put a pillow under the dress and went as a pregnant woman. And when I moved to New York, I did it a few times, but it suddenly wasn't the same. I think because in the city, I felt like I needed my own sort of street armor or whatever to deal with the street, the people out on the street, and the crazy people, and the real crazy people who look like some of the characters I was looking like, and I didn't want to be confused, I guess, with them. The advantage of being in them myself is I can just play around. When I've experimented with other people in them as models, paid models or friends or family, I feel like I don't know what to tell them to do because I don't really know what it is I'm looking for until I see it. So I tend to sort of rush them through the whole process. And then I redo it myself and it's like grueling. So even though I love to do it, it's much more work because I'm like frustrated at trying to capture on film something that I can't even articulate because I don't really know what it is I am looking for until I see it.
Cindy Sherman's larger-than-life society portraits from 2008 address the experience and the representation of aging in the context of contemporary obsessions with youth cultures and status. One critic wrote, "The pictures are very familiar and therefore extremely easy to look at. Their similarity to the commercial images they mimic renders them insidiously compelling." Sherman continues to work and is one of the lead artists in the American art scene today. Barbara Kruger studied at both Syracuse University and Parsons Schools of Design, where she studied under photographer Diane Arbus. After school, she worked as a graphic designer. In 1966, she took a job with Condé Nast magazines, working in the design department at Mademoiselle magazine. She was named the magazine's head designer a year later. For the next decade, Kruger supported herself doing graphic design for magazines, book jacket designs, and freelance picture editing. By 1979, Kruger stopped taking photographs herself and began to employ found imagery in her art, mostly from mid-century American print sources, over which she generally collaged words. Her gallerist wrote, "Barbara Kruger is an American artist known for her combination of type and image that conveys a direct feminist cultural critique. Her works examine stereotypes and the behaviors of consumerism with text layered over mass media images. Rendered with black and white, red accented, inspired by the constructivist Alexander Rodochenko, her works offer up short phrases such as thinking of you, or a captive audience, or I shop, therefore I am. Like multimedia artist Jenny Holzer, Kruger uses language to broadcast her ideas in a myriad of ways, including prints, t-shirts, posters, photographs, electronic signs, and billboards. I'm fascinated with the difference between supposedly private and supposedly public, and I try to engage the issue of what it means to live in a society that's seemingly shock-proof, yet is still compelled to exercise secrecy, she explained about her work. This 1989 piece, Untitled, Your Body is a Battleground, exemplifies Kruger's interest in addressing political issues. The artist gives the image additional meaning by dividing the canvas in half, from left to right, and bisecting the image, reversing from positive to negative and from top to bottom. The face is emblazoned with the slogan, Your body is a battleground. The composition originally was designed as a poster for a pro-choice rally in Washington, D.C. It also talks about the objectification of feminine beauty perpetuated by media and advertising. Kruger deploys the techniques that she perfected as a graphic designer. The artist comments on political, social, and feminist issues and renders her thoughts on religion, sexuality, racial and gender stereotypes, consumerism, corporate greed, and power. One critic wrote, hers is a strong denial of originality and authorship. The artist quotes from culture's cookbook, assembling pictures in the manner of a magazine editor. The idea of copying of the multiplicity of reproductions is part of the postmodernist agenda. She also does installations. Here you can see an example of that, where she's converted an entire room, floor, ceiling, wall, with her text and her imagery. Another example. And at even larger scale here. Born in Pennsylvania in 1947, Sherri Levine received a Master of Fine Arts degree from the University of Wisconsin in Madison. She's exhibited in New York City, and her work is in the permanent collections of the Art Institute of Chicago, the Guggenheim Museum in New York, the Tate Gallery in London, the Pompidou Center in Paris, and the Museum of Modern Art in New York, among others. Sherri Levine is an appropriation artist. She examines the codes of representation and authenticity. Levine recreates the works of historically significant artists such as Walker Evans or Vincent van Gogh or Edgar Degas. Her work interrogates notions of ownership and meaning. She wrote, "The world is filled to suffocating. Every word, every image is leased and mortgaged. We know what a picture is, but a space in which a variety of images, none of them original, blend and clash." Sherri Levine denies the whole preciousness of the object by simply reproducing the work of other artists. She strips away craving for the object of desire. The Metropolitan Museum of Art wrote, Levine photographed reproduction of Depression-era photographs by Walker Evans, such as this famous portrait of Ellie Mae Burroughs, the wife of an Alabama sharecropper. The series, entitled After Walker Evans, became a landmark of postmodernism, both praised and attacked as a feminist hijacking of patriarchal authority, a critique of commodification of art, and an elegy on the death of modernism. Far from a high-concept cheap shot, Levine's works from this series tell the story of our perpetually dashed hopes to create meaning, the inability to recapture the past, and our own lost illusions. So Sherri Levine photographed close-up Walker Evans photographs. You can see one of his Farm Security Administration era photographs on the left and Levine's copy on the right. They're virtually identical. by rephotographing another photograph. Conceptually, she's challenging the notation of authorship. She continued this practice not only with Walker Evans' photographs, but with a host of other photographers. Here you can see an installation shot of her exhibition after August Sander, or close up from that. One critic wrote, "Postmodernist doxa has it that we have become so contaminated by received images that it's futile to go out into the world and take more photographs. The only course open to the photographer is to recycle existing images, either by directly stealing, appropriating them, from wherever he or she can, or by reconstructing them in the studio out of his or her mind, which should, after all, contain nothing but received images." Richard Prince as an artist has made his reputation in the contemporary art world since 1977. He's known for appropriating and recontextualizing popular American imagery. Throughout the years, he's carried out his conceptual interest in the mediums of photography, sculpture, and painting. Some of his sculptures included muscle cars. His photographs of ads are poignant in their appropriation of fashion and cigarette advertising, and they question the notion of authorship while exemplifying an American ethos. Though the quote generally attributed to Pablo Picasso fits with Richard Prince as well. Good artists borrow, great artists steal. Prince's work are reproductions of reproductions. He literally rephotographs advertising images and displayed the photographs as his own. His photographs expose the grain of the original printing process and include any original flaws, changing the aesthetic into one of coarse duplication. They're conceptual pieces. They're not supposed to be perfect. They work to achieve a balance between their conceptual strength and their inherent beauty. The idea for the project that would challenge everything sacred about ownership in photography came to Richard Prince when he was working in a tear sheet department at Time magazine. While he deconstructed the pages of magazines for the archives, Prince's attention was drawn to the ads that appeared alongside articles. One ad in particular caught his eye, the macho image of the Marlboro Man riding a horse under blue skies. And so, in a process he came to call rephotography, Prince took pictures of the ads and cropped out the type, leaving only the iconic cowboy and his surroundings. That Prince didn't take the original pictures meant little to collectors. In 2005, Untitled Cowboy sold for $1.2 million at auction, then the highest publicly recorded price for the sale of a contemporary photograph. That has since been overtaken many times. Sam Abel is the photographer that made these original Marlboro ad images. It's worth hearing from him as well.
I put into it what I put into a photograph. I gave it life. I gave it its first life. And it's my photograph. No one would disagree with that. It's legal, technically legal for him to do that. If you're the originating photographer, it's a curious experience to, first of all, see it, and second of all, to see the value that's put on it by the art community. I'm not angry, of course, and I'm not particularly amused. I'm thoughtful about it. The life of a photograph is a very interesting, deep, complex, and ongoing, ever-changing subject that I'm taken up with as a writer and as a photographer. Photographs have lives. This is a curious life, I would call it. And I tried to get into the mind of Richard Prince as he chose to copy that photograph of mine and make a lot of money off it. Also get into the mind of the museum and DAP also. They had it on the cover of their catalog. And one of my thoughts is, my main thought is, that he must be a cheeky fellow. I think that's been my reaction, is how cheeky he was to do that. And it would never occur to me to do that to any other photographer or person. It's obviously plagiarism, and I was taught, by my parents, the sin of that. And so it seems to be breaking, to me, the golden rule. And that's a higher law than the law of art or commerce. It's the ultimate law. And he has to live with that. What I sense about him is that he can live with it. And that's a greater achievement than anything, being able to live with breaking the golden rule. So be it. A secondary thought is a photograph of mine could never be in the Guggenheim Museum, could never be on the cover of their guide, couldn't be on the cover of the DAP catalog. And that is because editorial photography, for the most part, is considered by those entities, by the Guggenheim and by the art establishment, to be not worthy. But copied by someone else, it is worthy. So the art world has something to answer for, and I look forward to their answer. I think that it goes to the life of a photograph.
I particularly like on that video how Abel says that he's not mad, and then thoughtfully goes about telling us why he is mad. Richard Prince did another series of work, Canal Zone, which also utilized appropriation. This project ended up in a lawsuit. The photographer, Patrick Cariou on the left, sued Richard Prince as Prince had used his work without permission. Originally in 2011, the judge ruled against Prince. That was largely overturned on appeal in 2013. The plain language of the stipulation seems to indicate that the fair use principles that we believe are important to artists engaged in the transformation of existing images were upheld even in the context of this settlement. Michael Strauss from the Andy Warhol Foundation wrote, "The intellectual context and aesthetic meanings of the work are not always visible to the naked eye and without art historical context. The judges at the Second Circuit Court decided that the case would hinge on whether a reasonable observer would find Prince's works to have been transformative and thus protected under the fair use law. The question remains, who is a reasonable observer?" Well, this case has been pieced out. It may be over at this point, but some of those works that were in question. The concept of appropriation is one that the postmodernists bring to us. Prince mines images from mass media, advertising, and entertainment, and has been doing so since the late 1970s. He redefined the concept of authorship, applying his understanding of complex transactions of representation to the making of art. He evolved a unique signature filled with echoes of other signatures, yet that is unquestionably his own. An avid collector and perceptive chronicle of American subcultures and vernaculars and their role in the construction of American identity. He has probed the depths of racism, sexism, and psychosis in mainstream humor, the mythical status of cowboys, bikers, customized cars, and celebrities, and most recently the push-pull allure of pulp fiction and soft porn, producing such unlikely icons as the highly coveted nurse paintings the Gagosian Gallery wrote. Well, lastly, I wanted to show you some Binh Don photographs. Binh Don is a contemporary Vietnamese-American photographer. He immigrated to the United States in 1979 along with his parents. He's not really a postmodernist in his own work, but he's adopted parts of what the postmodernists do, particularly the use of appropriating. Don received Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in photography in 2002 from San Jose State University and received his Master of Fine Arts degree from Stanford University. Binh Don uses a specific organic technique of his own invention to create his artwork. He refers to these as chlorophyll prints. Essentially what he does is takes the leaves from a living plant specimen, so it's either still a potted plant or one that he keeps the leaf alive by putting it in with nutrients and water, and then puts in contact with that a film or acetate negative. The negative will block the light from striking the leaf, and the leaf won't photosynthesize, essentially using the leaf's natural photosynthesis process over a period of several days to create an image not printed on the leaf, but as part of the leaf's photosynthesis process. The photographs he used are appropriated. They reference the Vietnam War, and they venture an opinion about the impact of the war on the Vietnamese people. The photographs are of people lost during the war or disappeared during the Khmer Rouge's reign. They are, in essence, shrines, like the beautiful butterfly that you see in the middle here. Their lives are fleeting. There's not much that we know about them. We just have remains their picture imprinted in a leaf. Don focuses his artwork on the Vietnam War in this work. They revolve around a theme of death. His images were described as being able to, quote, sum up revulsion over present violent conflicts in the world without direct topical reference. After the leaf has been exposed for enough time and the image appears on it, what Don will do is place that in resin. So he floats that in resin, and so they're solidified and stabilized there. I saw a show of these in San Francisco that was really quite stunning. It was lit in such a way, there were black frames. He's got black felt or something like that behind the resin. The resin's probably about an inch thick. And so when you go up on these, they kind of float in their space. They kind of float in the frame. And they were illuminated in such a way that they almost looked like they glowed. They were very ghost-like, haunting, and really, frankly, quite beautiful.